Hello and welcome, everyone. Welcome to OPN's Dev Talks, where we get a chance to sit down with the developers and get a chance to see gaming from their eyes. For our new people here today, we are Overpowered Noobs. We work to provide a platform for gamers and industry professionals to open dialogues about important topics in the PC gaming. Check us out at OPNoobs.com. Today, joining us from Galvanic Games will be Patrick Morgan to talk about his new game called Gurgamoth. Now, I can't say that word right now. Gurgamoth is a flying fighting game where the level is your weapon. Each match is lightning quick and focuses on intense flying combat and getting in your opponent's head. The controls are simple, but the mechanics and interesting levels bring out the game's depth. I'm your host today, Shane Games, and let's get started. So, Patrick, I just want to say thank you for joining us here today. It's great
thanks
to
for
have you on
having
the
me.
show. Yeah, Pat. Thank you, Patrick. Before we get started, how about you tell everybody a little bit about yourself and why you decided to get into gaming, especially indie gaming?
I've lived in Seattle about 8 years, and since I graduated from school, I've been trying to set up a game studio. And I taught myself programming. I worked at a bunch of other jobs, including an ad agency where we were making games. And it got to the point where finally, I'd saved up enough, and I had built the skill set needed, and the friends needed to build games on our own. And so a year ago, 4 of us left the ad agency to start our own game studio.
Oh, okay. So you said you taught yourself the skills then.
Yeah. I actually, when I was in school, I studied creative writing with the intention of writing for games. But then over time, as I started working on games in my spare time, I realized how much programming was needed to build a game. And so that was really what I focused most of my skill set on, was teaching myself how to code, teaching myself how to build games from scratch.
Was this during the time you were learning the creative writing aspect of it?
No, that was during school. It was after college.
I see. So after you got done, you just wanted to take it another step further.
Right. I was working as actually a 3D artist in Seattle, and I was working on games on the side, and I was having a really hard time finding programmers to help me for free. So I started teaching myself those skills so I could do it myself.
Well, that's fantastic. Now, you said you had a team of 4 people. Are these the same people who helped you with this game?
Oh, yeah, this is the same people.
Oh, nice. And for the record, can you go ahead and pronounce that name correctly, since I butchered it horribly?
It's really hard for people to pronounce. It's Gurgamoth.
Gurgamoth. Okay. And can you tell me, where does that name come from?
That came from our artist. Royce wrote it up on the whiteboard when we were doing a 48-hour game jam, building the core mechanics, and all of us just immediately were attached to the name. So
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, it doesn't have any meaning. Okay. But despite the challenge of people pronouncing it, we still love it.
Well, you say that you're into writing. Now, is any of the characters we're seeing in your game have any relations to any type of stories you were writing in the past?
No, I gave up a fair amount of that when I started writing code instead. The creative direction is all in the hand of Royce. I handle a lot more of the game design now, why things move the way they move, decisions we make around game feel and overall, the game design.
Now, some of the people are seeing this for the first time. How about you give us a little in-depth explanation behind your game, because this is not your typical PC game.
No, not at all. This is a flying fighting game. So the goal of it is to master the arena in terms of it's all about where you're positioned in the map and versus another opponent. And also the fighting element is you're trying to time your attacks to knock your opponents into deadly obstacles in the arena.
I see. And this is more for PvP, correct?
Oh, it's entirely PvP. We haven't really had any kind of team modes or any challenges that players could fight together. We started down that path, but we ended up scaling it back because we really wanted to focus on the core mechanics and making it feel just 100%.
Okay. Well, I guess my other question is, how did the theme come about? Because you got this tribal theme, and when you win, I assume you are summoning Gurgamoth, correct?
Right. Yeah. So the original concept of the game was that it's a bunch of different cultists from different eras, different religions, different parts of the world, who are all trying to summon their god. But eventually we decided they were all trying to summon the same god, which is Gurgamoth, this elder god, the seer of evil, the blood moon. We've taken out some of those themes because there used to be, like, in the first level we made, the moon would blink at you. Like, that was the eye of Gurgamoth watching your struggles. And there's a lot of eyes in all of the levels. You'll see, like, hidden away in corners or on TV screens. Like, there's this concept of you're fighting in the audience of this god and for his favor.
Do we ever get to see Gurgamoth? Now, when I was playing, I didn't see him. I don't know if this is because you're not supposed to see him, or you just kind of allude to his existence type thing.
It's more the latter. Like, we're alluding to his existence, and also he's, like, too big to behold. So you get to see, like, when you summon him, those eyes are the eyes of Gurgamoth, but he's far too vast to fit in a single rectangle.
That's fantastic, dude. Now, obviously, this is pretty in beta, right?
No, it's out. It's out on Steam.
Oh, that's right.
Now.
It just came out. Yeah. That's what I meant. Excuse me. So it just got released. And one of the biggest questions I seen was a lot of people were requesting for bots. Now, my question is that something you're looking to do, or you strictly want this to be just player versus player?
Actually, this last week, I finished, like, a very rudimentary version of bots that we're about to bring out into a beta. There's two things people have been asking a lot for. One of them is bots or some sort of single-player experience. The other is online multiplayer. And there's no way we'll be able to do the online multiplayer for this game, but bots was something that I could tackle on my own and get it out so that people can play even when their friends aren't over.
Now, you say you're not going to be able to tackle the online multiplayer. Is that just because you guys want to focus on what you can do successful in?
So this game is very fast, and to get the netcode working would take a lot of extra time. And that time investment, we don't think it's right for this game. Like, our next game, we're starting from the beginning with online multiplayer, like, as our focal point. But bringing it to this game would mean months of rewriting the base code and just starting over in a lot of ways.
I can understand that. So looking at this game, it kind of reminds me of some of the older type console games. What was some of your inspirations to get to this point in this type of game? Like, what made you decide this is what we want to do? We want to create a competitive, local, couch competitive play.
So we were actually working on a different game for 6 months when we started the company called the Rust Belt. It was this top-down tow trucking physics destruction game. And we were having a lot of fun with it, but we took a small break to do a game jam. And a couple weeks before the game jam, we had been at a local event. We're in Seattle, so there's a lot of indie game developer events. And this event had it was a critique circle. And so people brought their in-progress games, and we had a chance to sit down and play them. And one of them was like a Smash Brothers Brawl kind of game where it was a platforming fighting game, and you could pick up pieces of the level and throw them at your opponents and knock them off. But there was a bug in it where you could dash infinitely. And so all of a sudden it stopped being a platforming game and started being a game about flying around and trying to push your opponents out of the arena. And the creator was really apologetic. He was like, "I'm sorry, guys. Like, I'll fix this bug for next time. Like, this isn't the game I wanted to make." But when I saw people having fun with that bug, I thought there's something there. There's something worth exploring. And like, as soon as that 48-hour game jam came up, we decided, like, we have this idea. We saw, like, how excited people were about it. Let's see if in 48 hours we can create something interesting around that idea. And so that's what we did.
No, for a lot of people might not even know what a game jam is. Like, what is exactly is a game jam?
So a game jam is when a large group of people gets together, and in a specified period of time, usually 24, 48, 72 hours over a weekend, everyone splits into teams and makes a game. And so this was a 48-hour
So you guys
game
make a game within a certain amount of time?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. I mean, you can keep going. I'm sorry. Yeah, it's just interesting that you guys have you guys determine how long you got to make a game, right? That's crazy.
Yeah, and this was a contest as well. It was hosted by PlayFab, a company that specializes in back-end game services. So It was like a really nice catered event. Like, it was the best I've eaten since I've become an indie game dev. And it was hosted actually in our office space. We were in a co-working space downtown. and they rented the whole floor so that they could do it. And we were like, well, our desks are in this corner over here, so I mean, we'll just work the weekend and see, like, contribute to the game jam.
That's awesome. Like, I didn't even know that that was a thing. I mean, how is the pressure for that? Or is everyone kind of friendly? Or is everyone covering their screens? Like, don't look at my game.
Oh, no. Everyone's really friendly. It's very casual. And the games industry as a whole is, the indie games industry as a whole is pretty open and friendly and collaborative. So no, it's very friendly. Everyone was like, oh, I have this problem. Can you help with this? Or like, just can I play test your game and during breaks in their own development. But it's really fun. If you ever have a chance and if you are familiar with making games at all, I definitely recommend it. There's the Global Game Jam, which happens once a year. There's Ludum Dare, which happens 3 times a year, and these are global. These aren't like necessarily just in one city like the one we were doing was.
And I take it now, how was people's first impressions? Like when you, like your very first product of Gurgamoth, like how was that?
So we, as part of the Game Jam, we won the People's Choice Award.
Oh, nice. Congratulations.
Thank you. And that was one of the reasons we decided to keep going with it. But the general reaction, I think, was, you all built this in a weekend? Because by that time, the 4 of us had been working together for a while, and we had a really good process for building games. So what we were able to accomplish in those 48 hours was a lot more than I thought we would be able to accomplish. So,
and I'm kind of interested. So these characters, is any of these characters, like, I know you said you were writing, you said you threw a lot of it away, but it really sounds like you do have kind of like an interesting story here. Now, is like some of these characters are from anything you've ever written or anybody? Because it seems like there's a lot of depth behind them.
I think there is, but I think that's more Royce's doing than mine, because he kind of designed each character around this motif and this concept of who that character's backstory was. So there's Thrag, the Viking god, or the Viking cultist. There's Lilith, who was this prisoner who's escaped from this asylum so that she could raise Gurgamoth. There's our original cultist is Cavendish, who's the green one. He's a very Lovecraftian cultist, and nice. Most of our cultists actually, when we first started, looked like him. It wasn't until later that we differentiated the different cultists.
Yeah, I've seen that. Some of your early testing, they were like very similar. My favorite is Lilith. I like the padlock for her her ear. And it's kind of interesting because it sounds like you have a lot of story behind these guys. And I picked that up when I played the game. Who's your favorite, by the way? I'm kind of interested in that. Who do you pick?
So I always play Cavendish. Royce always plays Thrag. Royce, our artist. CJ, our engineer, always plays Lilith. And Taylor, our animator, tends to play Jatat, the Aztec.
Okay. And
so, yeah, we all have our own characters that we...
Well, it's interesting because there's 4 people on the project, and obviously this plays 4 people. Was that the intent? Was that like the intent?
It certainly helped. Although CJ and I have played the game the most in the act of programming it and designing it. But no, it was more... We had been playing a lot of local multiplayer games. CJ joined the team a little bit later than the other 3 of us. And he had been working on a game called Bitball, which was a like ninja basketball game. Oh, and wow. that was a 2v2 game or a 1v1 game. But we'd also been playing a lot of Lethal League, which is a 4-player local multiplayer game. Towerfall, which until recently was 4-player. They just added up to 8-player. But we've been playing a lot.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
We've been playing a lot, and most of those games support up to 4 players. And I think it's just because a lot of consoles support up to 4 controllers.
Is there, I guess, like looking at the game, I noticed that there's a lot of, I want to say you guys really focused a lot on effects and colors. So that tells me you guys are, pay attention to getting those in there. How hard was that? Because like there's a lot of effects going on. It's a 2D game, but there's tons of colors, effects, all kinds of stuff going off.
I think that polish is our company's strongest suit, like our team's strongest suit. Like coming from like an ads background, you're used to creating products very quickly with a lot of polish in them. So I think what we struggle from sometimes is more of like adding depth to the game, but in terms of the animations, the effects and stuff like that, that's where we shine. That's definitely our strong suit.
Yeah, absolutely. Because picking up the game, I mean, there's a lot of little effects, even in tiny things, like when you kill somebody and the skull comes up and the bones are bouncing. Like it's very fluid. The frame rates are very solid. I was very impressed with how solid it was. Like it was fantastic. And my other question would be, now that the game is out, it's live, and you're watching players play it, are they doing things that you may have missed, or things that you wasn't counting on, or something that you guys didn't do yourselves? Like watching people play.
Sometimes we get surprised by people. One of the biggest surprising techniques we saw someone play is there's a power up, the frost grenade, and in developing it and designing it, we hadn't considered the fact, because it'll freeze you as well. We hadn't considered the fact that someone could roll their thumb from the attack button to the dodge button and cast the frost grenade, but then immediately dodge its effect. And it was like one of those really cool little emergent behaviors that immediately excited us, because it was like, oh, like we didn't anticipate that. In a lot of ways, we weren't too surprised though, because so we work in a co-working space, a different co-working space now called the Indies Workshop, and it's south of downtown Seattle, but it is an office space specifically for indie devs. And one of the greatest things about it is that there's a lot of different teams there, but there's also a lot of events where people come to see what you're working on and to share like gameplay. So the whole 3 months that we spent developing this, we had so many play tests where we would see people interact with the game, and we built a lot of the systems around the problems people were having.
Also, playing the game, I noticed that you have a handicap system, right? So if you win, you lose the ability to charge again, because you can attack when you start off. You can attack 3 times, and you have to wait for it to come back up to do it again. What was the point of that? Is that just because you don't like it when a player is just dominating, or are you trying to balance it out? What was the decision process in doing that? So that
it defaults to on, but you can toggle it off as well.
Mm-hmm.
The main reason behind that is that we were trying to make it a little bit more of a party game vibe. And so we wanted a new player to jump in and be able to play immediately. And so that kind of pushes them up, like that auto balancing kind of like makes sure that they don't have too negative of a starting experience with it. Like they have a chance not to just be dominated by a new player. But we also recognize there's plenty of competitive players that like they don't want that kind of system. So that's why we let people toggle it off as well.
Yeah, and that's what I was doing. I was toggling it off. I was just curious in that. Now, what is would you say, because you guys have a lot of different power-ups, and when I was playing, one of the most, I thought, a strong one was the infinite one that lets you have as many hits as you want until the time runs out. What would you say is probably the most overpowered one, or the one that you've had to nerf a lot to kind of balance it out?
That one's definitely been a challenge. I find with that one, though, I end up killing myself half the time I use it. So just because it's very powerful, but it also lends itself to losing control if you overuse it. The power up everyone's complaining about is the screen split effect.
That's right. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Yeah, that's right. One is it's the one that shifts the screen over, right?
Right. Yeah. Okay. I would say maybe 10 to 20% of our players actually like it, and the other 80% get so disoriented that they want to be able to toggle that one off. And for now, I think we're going to take it out of the game just because it is such a divisive power up that it's just at the moment, until we added some system where you could toggle different power ups on or off. Like Towerfall has an option kind of like that where you can choose which power ups you want in the game. Like it's just gotten to the point where enough people don't like it that we're just saying, okay, we hear you.
Well, that actually brings me to a really fantastic point, and that is, it seems that you listen to your community. How important is the community to you? It must be very important if you're already willing to make changes.
From the very beginning, just the way we build games is very iterative, and listening to player input is by far the most important thing to us. in designing a game and making sure that we're building the right game.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I mean, a lot of the reviews have been positive. So how was those first moments when the game went live and you're checking to see the reviews come in? Do you, as some developers say, they stay away from reviews? Other developers say they just cry and cry and cry. How was it for you? Like, how was it those first hours at hitting live?
Man, remembering back those 2 months, these last 2 months, terrifying in some ways, because this was our first Steam launch. It's definitely not our first game, but it was our first time launching on Steam. And we're also launching a game that isn't like normally a fit for the Steam community. But in terms of the reviews, we're at 100% positive still.
Right.
And that's been fantastic. Like we love seeing people like stream the game. We love seeing people write about it. So that part's been wonderful. Yeah.
Well, I guess my other question too would be, what would you say for the players who have to play with the keyboard and mouse, like people who don't have a controller? Because obviously this game is more enjoyable with a controller. How do you kind of like? What would you say for those players?
Use a controller. Like we've in our Steam page, we were pretty clear. Just like, please don't buy this game unless you have a controller. We have
decisions and go ahead. I was just wondering, like, what was the decisions to say we're just going to go with a controller? We have to go with a controller. We
have keyboard support, but it's very like not official. Like we put it in there, and players can discover the key bindings. I think up to 2 players can play together on a keyboard.
Oh wow!
It's just,
I know that.
It's not as good. It's just having the L stick that's really the reason. Is the L stick is very important. The other problem is we've seen when a certain number of keys are held down at the same time, keyboards start locking out additional key presses, and so the game is actually impossible to play with a certain number of players on a keyboard anyway, just because of drivers and because of that issue in particular. So that's really the core reason we can't support keyboard.
Did it start that way? Like, did the game initially start on the controller, or did you start on the keyboard?
We started on the controller.
Okay, so from day one, it was use the controller.
Right.
Okay, no, that makes sense. Now, I guess my other question is, how long do you guys plan to support this game, like, going forward? Like, you're talking about you're going to remove a power-up. I mean, are you planning on doing much more updates later down the road?
I mean, we've got the bots update coming out. There's a couple other things I'd like to add that I can't really talk about yet, but we're also looking to bring it to consoles and potentially to some Android TV devices.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because this definitely makes for a console game.
Yeah.
Now, I would say something that you notice right away when you're playing this game is the music. And I wanted to hold off on talking about the music because I'm sure that by playing this game, I can tell that whoever does the soundtrack, this was a very big deal for you guys. And what went into the soundtrack? Because this is a very, almost has that, I don't know, that 80s kind of jungle vibe type feel to it. Like it's very, I want to say it's retro, but it has that, that hardcore jungle type house music. So tell us a little bit about the soundtrack.
So we didn't do the soundtrack in-house. And when we were doing the 48-hour game jam, we went onto SoundCloud and just went through dozens, if not hundreds of songs. And we found this song called, I'm going to mispronounce it. It's the song in High Temple, the level with the storm clouds and the moon in the background. So that was the first song we found. And for this really fast-paced game, it felt perfect. And the license for it on SoundCloud was non-commercial, royalty-free, like Creative Commons. And so for the game jam, since it was non-commercial, we could just use it without worrying. But when we decided after the game jam to pursue the game full time, we wrote the musician who made that song and said, "Hey, we really like this song. We're making a game. Can we use this song in our game? Like, what would you like in exchange?" And he wrote back and said, "I've been wanting to make music for a video game for so long. Like this, and like every time I've tried to, it's fallen through. So he's like, you guys can use my music for free. And so all of the songs that we've used in the game are from this library of music that he's built. And he specializes in dance music, which is why it's a little bit strange to have dance music in a eldritch horror fighting game, but because of the speed of the game, it fits. And we've loved working with him. He's been really helpful, both tailoring his music for like a video game, making it so that it loops, making it just fit the atmosphere.
Well, and you were talking about it coming to the consoles. Now, were you guys originally planning to take it to the console, or has the success of the game kind of led you to the consoles?
We've always been planning to take it to the consoles. My original goal was to do a simultaneous launch, but it is very, very, very time consuming to get on a console. Like, it is much more so than getting onto Steam these days.
Why would you say that, though?
It's just a long process. Like,
oh, I see. Like
building the relationship with the console holders, going through all their processes, going through their certifications. It is a very, very time consuming process. So we were like, we could either launch this on Steam now, or we could wait even more months and launch it on Steam as well as on Xbox and PlayStation. And we decided just to do a launch on Steam first to see like how well the game would be received and if there was anything we needed to know before we spent all the time taking it to consoles.
That's right. Yeah, it's like I said, it definitely has a console feel to it. That I can say for sure. Now, one of the maps, I can't think of the name of it right now, but it's the map where there's a giant like face moon thing, and the more you hit it, laser beams come out. What is that thing, and what kind of led you guys to that? Because it's very unique, right? It's a very unique mechanic, because like you can't kill anybody until you start pounding on this thing. So how'd you guys kind of come to that, and what is that?
I don't know. Let's see. I know the smashy ball, the spiky ball that you hit around and like gets faster as you hit it. That thing's name is Cletus. But the soul meteor, I don't know if we gave it a name or not. I'd have to go back through our logs. I think we did. It's basically just a compressed planetoid of souls all smashed together, and hitting it like causes them to shriek lasers in one direction or another.
Yeah, that's crazy. See, it sounds like you guys have so much like backstories on these guys. Like, you guys planning to release any type of like stories for these guys? It sounds like you guys have a lot of like backstory for them.
No, I don't think we have any plans to release any kind of narrative for them. But that's an interesting level that you bring up, because for beginning players, it's a favorite. But then I think the more you play the game, like it kind of lowers. Like there's more interesting levels the farther you get into the game. Like, I think for CJ and I have played this game way, way too much. That's definitely our least favorite level at this point, even though it started out being a very interesting level.
No, are you saying that because it's like there's only one way to die? Is that why you're saying it's like kind of least interesting?
So, like, part of the cool thing is that as you go through the level, the lasers segment the level into smaller pieces, and so you're fighting against both your opponents and the level at the same time. But there are just some design issues with it, in that like your choices aren't really as interesting in that level as they are in the other levels. I think my favorite level is either Smash Ball, which is the Tomb of Legion is the official name of the level, which is it's inspired really heavily by Lethal League, the baseball fighting game, and Arctic, the Arctic level, where the walls are. Right? Yeah, where the walls are all ice. Like, I still love that level a lot, because just being able to create danger zones and then try to direct your opponents into those danger zones, still, it's just wildly fun to me.
I think one of my favorites is the Buzzsaw level. I don't know the name, but the Buzzsaw level is really interesting because, I don't know, it makes you very nervous the entire time.
That level is our biggest arena. We played around a little bit with how big each map was, so they're not all the same size, and that one gives you the most space to work around.
Yeah, it's funny you say it gives the most space, because I feel so small in it, because I'm like, I don't want to touch anything. Like, I'm trying to like stay as silent as I can. So obviously, talking about that, you guys can dodge. Now, it's just an interesting mechanic in this game, I guess, because I always forget to use it. Do you experience that, like with players? I always forget that I have a dodge button, and I'm just
especially
yeah.
new players. And one of the other challenging things about it is from a purely, like if you're a new player, from a purely visual standpoint, dodge and attack look very similar.
Mm-hmm.
And so there is this thing where players don't even realize that they're fighting against someone who's using two different abilities against them. And that's from the very beginning, that was a big challenge for us. I don't know if we'll ever find a better way of solving it in this game, especially. But the two buttons are so important because in the 48-hour game jam, we just had attack. That was it. Like you could only attack. And dodge came out of this necessity to add a cat and mouse mechanic. So that you weren't just trying to overpower your opponent with getting better positioning. You're also trying to get in their mind and figure out what do they think I'm going to do. And dodge is that tool that allows for a little bit of deception and a little bit of repositioning.
And you can also stun people, right?
Yeah, stunning is by far that's the hardest mechanic to pull off in the game because you double tap dodge, you cancel your dodge on top of your opponent. But the trick is, it's a little bit of a rock, paper, scissors mechanic. If you cancel your dodge on top of a player that's attacking, they'll win that exchange. So they will, they'll get the attack off on you. But if you time your dodge right when their attack ends and you stun them, that's when you get the advantage over them. And so it's very timing and strategic, but because the game is so fast, it's really hard for a newer player to grasp that and to be able to handle that.
Now, it's obviously very knowledgeable about it. You make the game. Who would you say is the best in your team of four? Like, who wins?
CJ, unfortunately, it's a little bit painful for me how much better he is than me at this game. He wins, I would say, 70% of the time against me, maybe even more, but.
And so you said that you were getting ready to go to PAX here soon?
Yeah, we're going to be in Boston for PAX East in 2 weeks.
Taking the game with you, I take it, right?
Yeah, we're going to be in the indie mega booth in the mini booth area. So we'll be with a bunch of other indies having a good time. This isn't our first time taking Gurgamoth to PAX. We went to PAX South in San Antonio at the end of January. So just 3 weeks before we launched the game. And we were really excited at that point because it was our first time showing the game off that publicly, and the people who played the game fell in love with it. We had so many people come back to play more. We had a lot of people tell us this is our favorite game here, and it was a really great feeling. So I'm excited to take it to another PAX.
Does the team sit down and play with the people who are coming up, or do you just kind of let them play?
We try to let them play themselves. If there's not enough people, then we'll jump in. Sometimes we take it a little bit easy on them. Sometimes we pull the gloves off if they're people that love local multiplayer games and they're showing a lot of promise at it. We'll show them.
How is that for you? Watching people's expressions once they enjoy it must feel really good, right?
Yeah. These kind of games, these local multiplayer games, do really well at conventions. So it feels fantastic. PAX is definitely the highlight of every season for us.
And going to local co-op, we don't see that much anymore. Everything's online. So how do you feel about that? I take it you miss the old days of getting on the couch and unplugging your partner's controller away, right?
We definitely as a company, we love local multiplayer games. From a business decision, it's a really hard market to enter. The only reason we decided to do Gurgamoth was because we knew we could build it in a very short period of time. We had seen games spend 2 years in development that were local only, and then there's no way they could make enough money to justify spending 2 years on it. From a passion perspective, it's understandable, but from a business case, it's really hard. But in 3 months, we knew if we can sell more than 5,000 units over its lifetime, we'll make back what we put into it. And so that's why we were willing to take a risk on it. And also just getting your first game out there, like making games is really hard, and releasing them is even harder. So the experience of getting this game out there was valuable to us, even if we failed.
Right.
And we thought, go ahead.
No, you can go ahead.
We thought like what we could make would be a really good game, a really good experience. And so in a lot of games, content is the most time consuming thing. So with a local multiplayer game, the content is the other players. Like they are bringing to the game like what makes a game fun. And so we could afford to just build a small game that tried to facilitate that kind of fun interaction with your friends. And
my other question would be like, how do you feel about that? Like, obviously you're a huge fan of local co-op. Are you sad to see that it's disappearing, or are you sad to see that it's hard to kind of get into that market?
So it's really not disappearing. That's the weird thing is like, it's blossoming. There's so many local multiplayer games. The problem is no one talks about them. And so they're so underexposed. Like there's a really, really big selection to choose from, but because most people don't play games like that, they just fall by the wayside. Like we've met so many people that are like, oh, I'm making a local multiplayer game, and we play it and it's really fun, but then it's going to come out and then no one's going to talk about it. No one's going to buy it. So that's the tragic part about it, is that there's so many great games and so few people know about them.
I definitely miss local co-op. I come from the era of playing like Contra and Super Double Dragon, so I'm used to being with people. Now, as a company, Galvanic Games, what is the next thing after Gurgamoth? What's the next step for you guys?
So right now we're taking some more like games contracts to sort of build our war chest up and like figure out like what's next. But we have an unannounced project that we're putting more and more time into that is an online multiplayer game. Like we're starting from the ground up, and it's going to be we've learned a lot from the Rust Belt, and we've learned a lot from Gurgamoth, and I think that's going to really help us flesh out what our next game is going to be. But we're not quite ready to talk about it. I think if you follow us on Twitter, you'll see some like little flashes of art from it.
So so not ready to make an announcement here.
No, unfortunately not.
Not even a teaser?
No.
All right. So you definitely planning on making more games, and now for the next game that you're making, are you putting some of your creative writing to use there? Or are you?
Yeah. So I've been writing like. Most of our style of building games so far has been like this iterative design, where we start out with an idea and we flesh it out, we cut what doesn't work, we start polishing what works, and going through cycles. So since we're like spending time on other people's projects, like building up our capital again. Oh, sorry, I have a cat.
Oh, you're good. You got the kitty.
Yeah. Since we're spending time on other projects, we have time to really flesh out our design docs and also just like write more in the beginning, so that like before we even get started on building it, we think through a lot of the issues beforehand. And so one of those things that I've been writing is this lore document, like that brings all the lore of the world together in a cohesive place. So there will be more writing and more just narrative in the next game, but we still do prefer systemic games. Like my favorite game is Don't Starve, and I think and Terraria and Minecraft and all of those kind of exploration, crafting, or survival games. And I think we'll be bringing a fair amount of that to this next game as well.
Now, it's before we let you go, just real curious that a lot of people want to get into gaming somehow. And obviously you started as a creative writer, and then you had to teach yourself the ropes with programming. Is that something that you would say is the norm for everybody who's trying to get into it from their angle, whether it be programming or writing? Do they have to take on multiple tasks to be successful in your industry?
Oh, no, not at all. As an indie, you end up wearing a lot of hats, but if you go AAA, if you go any of the other routes, you can focus on one thing.
I see. So indie definitely got to wear everything, right?
Right.
Gotcha. Okay. Is there anything you would like to tell anyone who's watching the video that you may not been able to get out with Gurgamoth before, or any type of stuff that you're excited about coming out for Gurgamoth?
The bots are the most exciting because it opens up this door for everyone to play whenever they want. Go ahead.
I was just going to ask, was there difficulty settings with the bots?
That I haven't decided yet because I've made it so that they're challenging, but I'd like to make it so that like beginning players and more advanced players both have a chance. So we might see a normal and hard difficulty coming out. I've got a couple of settings that I can toggle that takes it from being like manageable to a little bit more challenging. So
okay.
I think there should be difficulty settings, but we're going to start the beta next week on that. So it'll be officially ready for PAX East.
Okay, that sounds fantastic. Well, Patrick, just want to say thank you for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, thank you. And for everyone watching, this is Gurgamoth. I said it right that time. It's on Steam. Definitely pick it up. It's a lot of fun, especially if you have friends to play with. I'd highly recommend it. Obviously, get a controller, and I'm sure you guys will have lots of fun. Again, thank you so much, Patrick, for coming. We definitely appreciate you here at OPN, and we definitely look forward to seeing you again, especially for your new game, if you want to say it.
I can't. But thank you. Thank you very much for having me.
Absolutely.
Cheers.